In a world where vibrant blue hair defined his uniqueness, Reiku Ichigo emerged as the son of a feared gang leader. Surrounded by loyal gang members who hailed him as the heir apparent and young master, Ichigo's true desires lay elsewhere. He longed to break free from the Yakuza's grip and pursue a different path, one of academic excellence and a respectable civil servant job. With unwavering determination, Ichigo aimed to walk the straight and narrow, his head held high under the radiant sun. In the midst of the bustling dining hall, an unexpected presence disrupted the air. Ichigo's father, the formidable gang leader, entered with a stern expression, hinting at a weighty conversation to come. The ominous message echoed through Ichigo's mind, leaving him with a sinking feeling. Uncertainty filled the room as he braced himself for the imminent discussion, knowing deep down that whatever it entailed, it spelled trouble on the horizon. On usual days, he would be dropped at school by 5 gang members who would constantly tell him to be careful of other rival gangs. He was so done with this bloody world that he badly needed to escape from his family to live a peaceful and quiet life. In the school backyard, he kept playing with a locket necklace, a promise from a girl who held the key 10 years ago. He didn't have any girlfriend since then, nor had the courage to court one. On the same day, a transferee student was getting late for class, so she jumped over the school fence and landed her knees on Ichigo's face. She apologized, and when the first period started, their teacher introduced Kirizaki Chitogi, who grew up in the United States. As soon as they spotted each other, the room was in chaos, and the two started fighting with each other like kids who always hated each other. While sitting next to her, Ichigo noticed that he lost the necklace, so he asked her to go find it since it was partly her fault. During Japanese class, Chitogi was having a hard time coping with the teacher. She grew up in the United States, and despite her fluency in Japanese, she still couldn't take all the notes. So Ichigo wrote it all for her, but she wasn't interested in his help. The next day, while Ichigo was walking with Onodera, she couldn't help but to ask about the locket that he treasured well. Somehow, she knew something about it, but couldn't find the courage to tell. Then, as soon as Chitogi walked past him, he smelled a nostalgic scent but couldn't tell what. That moment, Chitogi bluntly pointed out how he treasured such a thing when the other person he held a promise with may have already forgotten him. Ichigo knew that she was right, but it seemed like she didn't understand at all. So he yelled at her without holding back. It was afternoon the next day. Onodera told him to meet Chitogi. When he did, she threw the necklace onto his face like trying to hit a home run. Chitogi spent time finding it while he was not around. Though she told Onodera not to tell him, Onodera just wanted to tell Ichigo about it. Ichigo realized that Chitogi was right about how stupid he was to care about the necklace if there wasn't a possibility that he would meet that little girl once again. Onodera, on the other hand, told him that even if the little girl didn't remember him, he should still treasure it because it was a promise. Ichigo assured her that he wouldn't forget the promise he made with that girl, and as soon as Ichigo left, Onodera held a necklace. A key, to be exact. Then, was it her all along? Back in the house, Ichigo's father introduced him to a girl whom he should date for the next 3 years in order to prevent a war breakout between 2 gangs. Apparently, that girl was the daughter of his father's old friend. The moment he saw Chitogi, everything made sense, why she transferred at an odd time, why she was reluctant to share about her family, and how she smelled like a gun smoke. A quarrel between the 2 powerful families in the city. Could this be the start of another Romeo and Juliet? Chitogi was the daughter of a gangster, while Ichigo was the heir to the Yakuza. The Beehive Gang and the Shui were targeting each other. To prevent a war to happen, Chitogi and Ichigo must show that they were lovey-dovey to each other. Claude, Beehive's high-ranking member, broke over the wall and charged Ichigo for kidnapping Chitogi. However, the 2 bosses from different gangs declared their relationship to end the chaos. Still confused about what was happening, Ichigo told everyone that he wouldn't date a gorilla girl. Then, a bullet was fired past him. It was Claude, who was kinda overprotective of Chitogi. On the other hand, Chitogi calls Ichigo a bean sprout, which made the latter's highest-ranking member almost slash her head off. Everyone was already suspicious of their relationship, so the 2 of them had no choice but to pretend like they were so in love with each other. Ichigo's gang members seemed to believe them, but Claude didn't. When they were alone outside, Ichigo thanked her for finding the locket necklace. He explained that he became friends with a girl with a promise that they would meet again. The next day, Chitogi arrived at Ichigo's house with Claude to go on a date. Since they hadn't dated anyone before, they struggled in their pretense to act like a real couple. Not to mention their respective gang members kept on tailing them. Ichigo came up with romantic date ideas that he fantasized about with his longtime crush, Onodera. Yes, he liked Onodera for a long time, but didn't have the courage to confess. Of all the things that they did, from coffee dates to watching movies, Chitogi just kept complaining about everything, and even slept inside the cinema. However, for a short moment, Ichigo realized that she was cute when she was asleep. After the movie, Chitogi asked him to go get a soda because she was thirsty. When he left, some thugs were hitting up on her. She was about to punch them, but Ichigo came back and dragged her away. At the park, Ichigo started lecturing her not to waste her energy on people who didn't deserve it. Chitogi blushed for a moment and admitted that their first date wasn't that bad. Ichigo, on the other hand, realized that it was his first time he held hands with a girl. Chitogi excused herself and went to the bathroom. For the first time in her life, she let a man lead her by hand. She wasn't against it, but she couldn't help but to feel a little embarrassed. While Ichigo was waiting outside, he frustratedly blurted out how it would be easier if he dated Onodera. Suddenly, Onodera called out his name to face her. It was at that moment that he knew she heard it. Meanwhile, in the bathroom, Chitogi heard the thugs talking about how suspicious their relationship was. So she went all out pretending that they were in love in front of Onodera. Ichigo was stone cold and couldn't move at all. Togi kept telling him that he should get along, but in front of his crush, he couldn't, so he denied everything about their fake relationship. Chitogi stepped on his foot and bid farewell to the two because she still had some errands to do. When they were alone, Ichigo tried to explain that it was just a fake one, but Onodera was convinced. Ichigo thought that it was perfect timing to ask her about the locket. He was wondering if she had ever seen it before when she was younger. For a moment, Onodera's eyes widened, but she still denied it. She then left Ichigo in the park. When Ichigo found Chitogi, he handed her a bean jam cake because he felt sorry for what he did. Meanwhile, Claude was convinced that the two were just pretending, and he would do everything to crush Ichigo. Ichigo woke up from a dream when he first met the girl 10 years ago. He kept rolling in his bed because he wasn't able to know her name. While walking on his way to school, Chitogi called out his name from across the street. She had dark circles under her eyes like a dead person, so Ichigo asked about it. It happened that when she got home from their date, she was bombarded with a lot of questions. They thought that the school was a place for them to relax about their fake relationship, but even Claude was still tailing them from outside. Instead of clearing everything up so their classmates wouldn't misunderstand, they had no choice but to get lovey-dovey in school, too. Ichigo was alone in the hallway when Onodera approached him. He thought it would be his chance to clear things out between him and Chitogi, but he didn't want her to think that he liked her. He liked her, but he wasn't ready to confess, so he talked about anything else instead. Onodera started praising him about the little things that she noticed. She thought that it could be the reason why Chitogi liked him. Suddenly, someone bumped Onodera from behind, and so her key fell on the floor. It took him a moment to realize that it was not just a normal key to a house, but a key to something like a locket. Onodera picked it up and told him it was a key to his bookcase at home. Due to her panic, she rushed to go home, leaving Ichigo confused and helpless and thinking that Onodera could be the girl he met back then. The next day, Chitogi and Ichigo kept on pretending that they were lovey-dovey inside the school. When Ichigo got out of the restroom, he noticed how Chitogi tried to interact with their other classmates. Chitogi told him that Claude wouldn't be around that afternoon because of some things to work on, and so Ichigo felt relieved that he could talk to Onodera about everything. Ichigo advised her to talk to someone close in order to relieve the burden of their situation. But Chitogi put up an attitude, leaving him confused about what he said wrong, and so he went to see his best friend and talk about it. His friend noticed that he never saw Chitogi acting chummy with anyone in particular besides Ichigo, so it was concluded that she was having a hard time getting close with anyone, and so he went to see her in the classroom. He happened to eavesdrop on some girls in their class talking about Chitogi seemingly putting up a wall whenever they talked to her, but when it comes to Ichigo, she was totally fine. So they were thinking that she might actually be looking down on them. Ichigo didn't like this idea, and so he went to the room and saw Chitogi writing in her notebook. She read it out loud like she was trying to take notes on her classmates' interests so she could interact with them. This made Ichigo reflect on how he started his days in the school. Given that they both came from a not-so-normal family, they found it hard to be friends with anyone. And so, Ichigo assured her that it was fine and that he would help her in her notes. She was annoying, but he totally understood how she felt. Chitogi clarified that they were just doing a performance, and she wasn't bound to act cute all the time with him. Onodera happened to hear it, and she kept on thinking what that performance meant. If it isn't because of Claude, Chitogi and Ichigo wouldn't have to act like they were in love. But thanks to that, The love triangle story continues. Since that day he helped her with her friend notebook, everything worked out well, and Chitogi managed to integrate herself into the class. Since their advisor in class partnered them up to water the garden, Ichigo realized that Chitogi had been seeing her smile a little more often. She caught him staring at her, so she called him a perv, which made Ichigo think that she hadn't changed at all. Meanwhile, Onodera and her friend, Miyamoto, just watched them over the glass hallway. Miyamoto knew she had a crush on him, and despite Ichigo having a girlfriend, she was convinced that the guy had a thing for Onodera. And so, she initiated a group study in Ichigo's house. Ichigo was far more grateful to have Onodera in her room together with Miyamoto, Meiko, and Chitogi. But whenever he would look at her, she would look away out of embarrassment. Meanwhile, Chitogi was so excited that she couldn't stop circling around Ichigo because she had never been in a study group with friends before. Then, the tea had arrived, and so Ichigo accepted it when Onodera tried to help too, and their hands touched each other. The tea was spilled over because of the tension going on. While doing their homework, Onodera was having a hard time solving math, and so she asked Miyamoto, but she had said it was way beyond her knowledge. She asked Ichigo to help her instead. Ichigo felt pressured with Onodera's presence next to him, but Chitogi stole the spotlight and taught her instead. Chitogi was an excellent student in academics way back in the United States, and so she was more advanced than the others. Then Chitogi asked Onodera if she was into someone, but she said she wasn't. For Ichigo, this was good news, so he could have her. Chitogi seemed to forget about their pretense that she started to talk about experiencing romance. Everyone turned their heads, and as soon as she realized what she had done, she told them that it was a joke. Ichigo even helped her in covering up her mistake. Then, Meiko asked how far they had gone, and so Ichigo dragged him outside. Meiko knew all along that it was fake, but he just wanted to tease them. However, he told him that Onodera had a crush on him, and so it would be better to tell her about their secret. Meanwhile, the gang members were frustrated that their young master hadn't taken it far with Chitogi, and so they tricked and pushed them inside a storehouse. Chitogi was scared of the dark, so she had no other choice but to cling to his back. It was then that he noticed how beautiful her eyes glistened with tears, how she had long eyelashes, and how sparkly and soft her lips were. The scent of a shampoo he never smelled before, and the warmth on his back because of her body's heat. That moment, he knew she was totally hot. Just when he was determined to give his heart to Onodera, he thought of Chitogi as a girl for the first time. Chitogi noted a ladder, but Ichigo ignored her idea of getting help from outside because he couldn't leave her alone in the dark. And so, Chitogi started asking him about how he felt for Onodera. Ichigo started talking, and she noticed that when Onodera was the topic, he would talk a lot. But then, the two of them started arguing about not wanting to kiss each other. Chitogi got up and tripped herself. She fell on top of Ichigo in an awkward position. The two locked their eyes, telling each other to move, but no one did. Suddenly, Claude opened the door and saw them like they were doing something. Onodera and Miyamoto saw them too, and so they hurriedly went home. Chitogi thought that he had redeeming qualities, or was it just all in her imagination? Ichigo was about to enter the room when he heard Miyamoto talking about Onodera's key and the boy he made a promise to 10 years ago. He couldn't process what he heard, still in disbelief if it was really her. On the other hand, Miyamoto was determined to find out Ichigo and Chitogi's relationship in order to make Onodera happy to be in a relationship with Ichigo. Miyamoto asked Chitogi and Onodera to join the girls' swimming team because they were short of members. However, Ichigo was also asked to teach Onodera how to swim. Chitogi noticed how different his treatment was towards her and Onodera. Onodera got the gentle treatment while he was very harsh on her. Miyamoto asked about what happened in the storehouse, but Ichigo cleared everything up. Onodera knew that Miyamoto did it for her not to overthink about it. Chitogi was kicked out from being Onodera's instructor because she was far way too advanced. And so Ichigo did the things starting from the basics. He couldn't help but to drown himself on purpose when he realized how hot her body was. He knew he wanted her to be his wife. When Onodera went to buy some drinks, Ichigo saw the key and tried to unlock his locket using it. He remembered the promise he made with her and that it was to get married together. The girls came back and caught him having Onodera's locker key, and they assumed he was some kind of pervert. The next day, everyone lined up for the athletes to sign it. The two of them couldn't help but to argue a lot in front of everyone, and so Miyamoto suspected that they could be a fake couple. When the race started, Onodera used a kickboard since she hadn't mastered swimming yet. Then, suddenly, someone shouted that a woman was drowning. It was Chitogi. She had leg cramps and couldn't resurface. Without a second thought, Ichigo jumped in the pool and grabbed Chitogi. Even though she was breathing, Meiko told Ichigo to perform CPR. He He was pressured to kiss her in front of Onodera, and so it took him some time to do it, but then Chitogi woke up and hit him in the face. At the end of the day, Miyamoto concluded that the two of them had good and bad chemistry, which made her more and more confused. She started pointing out Onodera's key, which belonged to someone she had met 10 years ago. As a friend, he advised not to think about the boy too much, but to focus on the current situation she was in. Chitogi was someone uneasy to battle with. During lunch, Miyamoto and Onodera wondered what Chitogi's family was because she seemed rich with all the expensive foods she had. Then, Chitogi blurted out how much she hated Ichigo, but Onodera told her that it was him who saved her in the pool. Needless to say, she had to thank him for what he did. She tried for about 3 times, but couldn't relay the words "thank you," and they just kept on arguing with each other like cats and dogs. She ended up hitting him every time, and so she told Miyamoto and Onodera that she couldn't do it. Miyamoto stepped forward and asked her if they were really dating. Chitogi was about to say yes, but then she remembered what Ichigo told her about trusting someone with a secret, so she wouldn't have to carry it all. After that, Chitogi went ahead, leaving Miyamoto and Onodera alone. Onodera knew that it would be her only chance before anyone else. Back in the garden, Ichigo figured out that Chitogi was just trying to thank him for saving her life, but as always, it ended up in an argument. When Chitogi left, he found his locket necklace on the floor. In the classroom, Ichigo and Onodera were alone. But before Miyamoto left, she told her that it would be the perfect chance to confess her feelings. The ever-so-naive Ichigo thought that she had a fever because she was turning red all of a sudden. Ichigo was about to buy some medicine, but Onodera grabbed his hand. Slowly, very slowly, she was about to tell him the truth, but a baseball hit the glass window, passing the space between them. Ichigo left to release the tension that was going on, but even if she did confess, it would be too good to be true for him. Miyamoto threatened her that their relationship would be over if she couldn't make it the second time. Back in Chitogi's room, she was wondering how Ichigo kept on losing the locket if it meant something to him. A moment later, she went to his house and gave the locket necklace. He was grateful that she found and returned it to him. In her car, the driver asked if she let him know that she got it repaired. She didn't bother telling him that, but Ichigo noticed it. Speaking of promises, Chitogi made a promise with a boy when she was little, which was similar to his story. She could still remember what the boy said, and it was Svasha in love. The story's getting more and more complicated. First, Onodera has the key, and now Chitogi has someone she holds a promise to? Which is which? It was morning in school, and all the girls were screaming when a person in a men's uniform came inside. His name was Tsugumi Saishihiro, a transfer student. But who knew that he was a close friend of Chitogi? Under Claude's orders, he was tasked to expand knowledge on their base. Then Tsugumi introduced himself to Ichigo. He was taken as an orphan by Claude and became Chitogi's playmate. It was lunch, but Tsugumi kept showing public displays of affection towards Chitogi in front of Ichigo. Meiko teased him about it, but Ichigo didn't seem to care at all. When Chitogi went to the bathroom, Tsugumi asked Ichigo to talk about something on the rooftop. Tsugumi confronted him about how much he loved Chitogi and if he was willing to die for her. Tsugumi was a skilled hitman who carried weapons with him. Defenseless as he is, Ichigo didn't even stand a chance. Tsugumi started to question his intentions to the Beehive's gang, so he declared a duel with him at the school's backyard in order to prove that he loved Chitogi more than Ichigo did. Realizing his loss and the people who would haunt him, Ichigo boldly claimed Chitogi as his girlfriend, and no one should take her away from him. Chitogi happened to hear all of it when she was about to open the door. Chitogi calmed the atmosphere, but Tsugumi's mind was fixed, and the duel would happen later in the afternoon. 10 years ago, Tsugumi made a promise to Chitogi that he would get stronger in order to protect her, so it would be a slap in the face to let a defenseless Ichigo have Chitogi on his side. When Tsugumi left, Ichigo knew that Chitogi was not on his side, but she told him not to lie against him. This surprised Ichigo. Guess he didn't have any choice but to man up. It was already 5 in the afternoon when the duel started. Ichigo ran as fast as he could when Tsugumi loaded a lot of weapons on his back. Chitogi knew that Tsugumi wouldn't fight barehanded. It was more like a chase than a duel. Ichigo broke the ice for him that Chitogi was not some damsel in distress waiting for her knight in shining armor. For a moment, Tsugumi realized he was right, but it made him angry even more. The chase went down to the pool from the 3rd floor. Everyone was worried about them, but then Ichigo pulled out Tsugumi, who was lying unconscious. He carried him towards the men's locker room and removed his pants so he wouldn't soak in wet clothes. When Ichigo unbuttoned his shirt, Tsugumi woke up and frantically covered herself. It turned out that Tsugumi was a girl who just liked to wear men's uniforms in order to quickly respond to situations. Mako screamed outside the locker room and was about to enter. Both of them panicked on what to do. When Chitogi opened the door, no one was inside. She was sure that she heard voices. Ichigo and Tsugumi were hiding inside the locker, pressing each other's bodies inside. Tsugumi started to tell that she had no idea why people always mistook him for a boy. Ichigo apologized. If he knew she was a girl, then he didn't have to undress her and be inside the locker with their bodies close to each other. Tsugumi started getting emotional when she realized that she lost to someone lower than her. She started questioning her abilities to protect her till the end. Ichigo was surprised that she was acting differently rather than being aggressive. Ichigo was getting flustered by their bodies getting closer to each other. He kept reminding himself that his crush was Onodera, but all he could see were her bosoms. Tsugumi had no other choice but to hit him in the face. But to Tsugumi, she didn't mind being treated like a boy, since she had long abandoned being feminine just to protect Chitogi. Ichigo thought that it was a big waste since she looked really cute. All her life, no one had ever told her that she was cute until that very day. Chitogi heard the noise earlier and opened the locker the moment Ichigo complimented Tsugumi. Well, obviously, Chitogi hit him again for being such a pervert. When Tsugumi had the chance to explain everything, Mako appeared and told Ichigo that he would be writing an apology letter to their advisor for using the pool without permission. Ichigo apologized to Chitogi and went ahead. Tsugumi, on the other hand, admitted that she had lost to him. She realized that despite everyone worrying about Chitogi, she knew that she had always been wild and was the kind of person who would come home with a smile on her dirty face. Still, she was confused why people always mistook her for being a guy, and so Chitogi dressed her up in a woman's uniform and put a bow on her hair to make it look like she was really a girl. Everyone in the room blushed at her cuteness. Tsugumi argued that she just came to the school to protect and fulfill her promise that she had made with her, but Chitogi forgot about the promise they had. It was when Tsugumi met her for the first time and promised to become someone who could protect her. But to Chitogi, she didn't know why Tsugumi was able to remember something that happened 10 years ago. When Tsugumi was on her way home, she changed into a men's uniform again. She couldn't help but to think that Chitogi actually had forgotten the promise she made with her first love 10 years ago as well. Love triangle is already too much. And now we have Tsugumi? Claude was holding a timer as Tsugumi wore a blindfold. He was testing her skills in assembling a gun. When asked about Ichigo, she started going wild about it, but then she remembered how he called her cute. Her face was red from embarrassment, and Claude was confused about her sudden behavior. It had been 3 days since Tsugumi got into the school where Chitogi and Ichigo studied. Onodera thought that she was a guy, but Miyamoto knew all along that she was a girl. When Mako entered and told Chitogi how beautiful she was that day, Tsugumi didn't hesitate to pull out a gun and pointed it at him. Meanwhile, the boys in the class were relieved that Tsugumi was a girl, so the girls would stop fawning over her, but even if it was the dress, she was still popular among them. Ichigo thought that everything would be normal, but Tsugumi seemed to be excessively wary of him. And for the last few days, he wasn't able to get near Chitogi. Not that he wanted to be with her, so it didn't really matter. In the garden, Ichigo informed Chitogi that they were instructed to buy food for the animals. Tsugumi volunteered to do it with her, but Chitogi ended up scolding her for wearing a men's uniform again. She thought that she would be able to find out the truth if they were dating or not, but to her surprise, Chitogi brought her to a clothing shop, and Tsugumi looked like a goddess in a blue dress and heels with a bow on her head. People kept looking at her, so she thought she looked weird, but once again, Ichigo complimented her in the best way possible. In the pet shop, Ichigo realized that when she had a cute look when admiring the animals in a girly outfit, she was a totally different person. Tsugumi noticed him staring at her, so she stood up, but she lost her balance and was about to fall when he caught her like a knight in shining armor. While they were heading back, Tsugumi complained about her feet. Ichigo got mad for not telling him about it, and so he carried her on his back. Tsugumi struggled to get down, but Ichigo didn't let her walk in pain. She wondered how he treated her so nicely and kept on telling her that she was cute when in fact, he was her enemy, and anytime soon, she would have to eliminate her. Ichigo started asking about how many years they had been together with Chitogi. By that time, when they were 5 or 6, Chitogi seemed to be pretty in love with someone. Then he asked her about her crush, but she didn't have one, and she abandoned her femininity to protect Chitogi. but to him, someone would come along and would love her wholeheartedly. Back in the mansion, while assembling a gun, she lost her concentration when Claude mentioned Ichigo. She knew that there was something going on in her. She had a strange feeling lately, the physical changes that seemed to come about only under certain conditions. Her pulse would start racing only in front of a certain person, and she felt like her heart was being crushed and her face would get hot, and whenever that person's around, she would stumble over her words. Chitogi thought that it was some kind of serious disease. To seek answers, she went around asking everyone about it. Claude said that she should go to the hospital to get herself checked. Frustrated about not getting a concrete response, she went to ask Mako, but then he just laughed because he knew what was happening. Then she went to Miyamoto and Onodera, and there she knew that she was indeed in love with Ichigo. She met up with Chitogi and told her everything about it. Chitogi didn't seem to mind about it since their relationship was a fake one. However, she didn't let her guard down. Chitogi started asking about the boy she had a crush with when she was still a child. She got embarrassed at the idea of having a crush with someone, and so she changed the topic. By then, Ichigo passed by and told Tsugumi that she may be in love. Confused about the situation, Tsugumi kept firing a gun at him. Back at Chitogi's mansion, she opened her closet to find any clues. She stumbled upon a lot of toys, but she saw a diary and opened it. It was August 21st when she went out with him again to play. That day, she wrote that she wouldn't mind getting married to him. On the day they were leaving, she was going to make a promise to him. However, the next page was empty. When she picked up the diary, a key fell on the floor. There was a key. However, she didn't know what it was for. When Tsugumi knocked on the window, she opened it and asked her to find the place where she met the boy. But she seemed to forget that their camping trip would be the day after. The camping trip was divided into 6 groups. In the bus, Mako arranged a scheme where Ichigo was in the center between Onodera and Chitogi. Miyamoto, being a tease, always pushed Onodera whenever a curved line was ahead. It wasn't like Ichigo didn't like it at all, but Tsugumi kept pointing her gun at him, threatening him not to push himself towards Chitogi. After around 40 times or so of being pushed, they were tasked to cook rice and make curry. Chitogi was even more glad to experience something with friends. Ichigo noticed how she got all excited whenever things like that would happen. However, Chitogi couldn't help but to remember the scar from back then when the boy tried to protect her from some animal. When she was about to approach Ichigo, she tripped over some wood and the basin full of water poured onto his head. When Ichigo flipped his hair up, Chitogi noticed a scar on his forehead. Meanwhile, Ichigo noticed the key on her necklace, a key he had seen somewhere before. And so, Chitogi asked him how he got the scar. He got it when he was a kid. He had said that he probably got it from some animal. Chitogi blushed at the thought of it, but when she realized the keyhole, she got even more embarrassed and unsure of everything. When everyone was in their room, they played cards, and whoever lost would talk about their first love. Everyone was serious about the game so as not to spill their secrets from each other. But then, Chitogi and Ichigo were the ones left. Chitogi was about to pick the card when their teacher opened the door and instructed them to prepare for their bath. Chitogi still got the Joker card, which made her safe from talking about a boy 10 years ago. They were heading to the bath when Claude plotted something to ruin Ichigo's reputation. Chitogi spotted him, but she didn't mind at all. Claude swapped the women's bath with men. When Ichigo submerged in the water, Chitogi went fully naked. Chitogi was aware that it was Claude's doing, but she still panicked to see each other naked. Onodera, Miyamoto, and Tsugumi went inside the hot spring, so Chitogi had to submerge his head in the water. It took him some time to escape for the door, but their teacher and the other girls from the class came from the same one he was about to go to. Chitogi didn't know what else to do with Ichigo, so she kept distracting her classmates so as not to get near him. Tsugumi noticed someone, so she hit the basin, causing it to cut in half. He hid behind Chitogi all the time until he found a hole underwater. As he was about to escape, Tsugumi called out Onodera to tell about someone she was crushing on. Ichigo wanted to know who it was, but Chitogi told him to just go. Onodera panicked and jumped into Ichigo's place, blocking the hole. Chitogi tried her best to pull Onodera away, but her hand slipped off from hers, so Onodera bumped into Ichigo. Chitogi tried her best to cover it up, but she slipped and saw Ichigo's thing while he saw hers. That night, Chitogi confronted him if he saw anything. He couldn't tell her something like that. A night passed by since the women's bath incident. Everyone was talking about the test of courage that would be conducted in the woods during the night. Each pair must be a boy and a girl, so Mako offered his ticket to Ichigo if ever she would get into partner with Onodera. Meanwhile, Miyamoto also wanted Onodera to pair up with Ichigo. The lots were drawn. It must have been luck when Ichigo got to pair up with Onodera. Chitogi was paired up with Meiko and Miyamoto paired up with Tsugumi. Everything went well, not until Chitogi forced herself to substitute the ghost in the game. Back in the woods, Chitogi was left alone with a dead flashlight. She screamed and cried, hoping that someone, no, Ichigo would save her again. When it was Ichigo and Onodera's turn to proceed to the woods, he was all sweaty while holding hands with her. Suddenly, Meiko and their other classmate reported that Chitogi was alone with a dead flashlight. Without hesitation, Ichigo rushed to the woods and tried to find her. When he did, she remembered in her past how the boy saved her from falling into the crevasse. That moment, Ichigo smiled and told her that a ghost shouldn't cry. Back there, Chitogi kept holding his jacket. He told her that it was okay to call her by her first name, and she would do the same to him. This kind of behavior surprised him. Then she reasoned that back in the bath, the girls were wondering why they still call each other by their last name despite being in a relationship together. She got away with that lame excuse, but when they got to meet with everyone, the game already ended. Tsugumi offered to take her into the place she played with the boy, but realizing how Ichigo acted like the guy in her childhood memories, she just wanted to forget about it at that moment. Back in the school, Ichigo was about to talk to Onodera, but Chitogi interrupted him. He called her first name to remind her of the exact name of the room. Onodera noticed it, so Miyamoto hit her because Chitogi beat her to it, but she couldn't do something like that to Ichigo. As soon as Kurosaki went to the prep room, Tsugumi asked everyone to participate in planning a surprise party for Chitogi since it was her birthday. So Miyamoto asked Ichigo and Onodera to buy her a present after school. They agreed to meet up at 5 at the cafe. At the cafe, everyone seemed to have a partner on a date. Onodera stopped by outside and fixed herself in front of a tinted glass window. When she realized that Ichigo was inside, her face turned red. Then, Onodera broke the ice about what they should be buying as a present to Chitogi. Before he knew it, they were done shopping for a present. It felt like time passed by faster than it could have been. Onodera was kinda conscious if he was just fine to be with her or if Miyamoto just pushed him to do something he didn't like to do. Ichigo knew in his heart that he longed to be with Onodera, so the two of them took a detour over the area. They ended up at the end of a narrow alley where there was a nice view of the sea. It happened to be her favorite place she discovered a year ago. For some reason, he was happy that she brought him to her secret place. He was even more surprised when no one else knew about it except for him. The way she said it was just so cute that he couldn't help but to fall for her harder. But when she turned her head and mentioned the word promise, it triggered an old memory. He couldn't muster the right words to say, but he still did it anyway. He asked if she was the girl he made a promise to 10 years ago. Without hesitation, Onodera believed that it was her. She apologized for denying it the very first moment he asked. When she saw the locket he was looking for in the school backyard, she remembered the boy she promised with. He has the same locket as Ichigo. Although it was a vague memory, she thought that maybe he might have been that boy. Ichigo now remembered how Onodera convinced him not to forget about the promise he made with that girl. She was hoping that he might be the one. Then, a sudden urge to kiss him came to her mind. However, they were interrupted by his phone ringing. It was Tsugumi who waited for them at the entrance gate of the mansion. When they got there, Chitogi was still worried that everyone would turn their back against her if they knew that her parents were gangsters. But Ichigo assured her that it wouldn't be a problem. During the present giving, Miyamoto gave her a novel while Onodera handed her a stationery. The gang members gave her 1,000 folk song CDs and a year's supply of bananas. Meanwhile, Claude gave him a customized Maybach car, but since she didn't have a license yet, it was still of no use. When Ichigo gave her a present, everyone was determined to kill him. The present was a gorilla stuffed toy. For the first time, she let out a genuine laugh and thanked him for it. When Ichigo took a break in the balcony, Chitogi joined him and was honest to admit that she would be going to cherish it. In that very moment, Ichigo's heart skipped a beat. Then, she asked him if he still loved the girl he made a promise to 10 years ago. Thinking about Onodera, he replied that he still did. Out of all the questions to be asked, she mentioned if he had ever heard the phrase, Sazi in love. What is that even supposed to mean? Let's find out. Ichigo was too stunned to respond, but when he did, he asked her where she had heard it. Chitogi confirmed that he was the one who made a promise to her years ago. She told him the truth about her memory. Surprisingly, it was the same memory he had. Before they could clear up everything, the fake couple started arguing if it happened that they were each other's promise. Then Chitogi vowed to let him do whatever he wanted with her, even a kiss if the key would open the lock. As she turned the key, it snapped into two. His hopes to try Onodera's key with his locket would seem to be postponed, since the other half of the key was stuck inside. Chitogi, on the other hand, pretended like she never hoped to be the girl he made a promise to. While walking on the other side of the mansion, Chitogi's father thanked him for making his daughter's life more meaningful since they moved to Japan. Chitogi's father was sure that they would get along since they became good friends as kids. It was at that moment that he knew Chitogi was his playmate along with the other one, Onodera. Back then, the three of them spent time playing together. But why were there two keys? And both of the girls made a promise to someone. That promise was when they get to reunite, they would get married. But which one of them was it? Supposing it was Onodera, his heart was full of joy. But if it happened to be Chitogi, then it wouldn't mind at all since he was in love with Onodera, and that promise was just 10 years ago when they were still kids. In the school's garden, while Ichigo was watering the plants, Onodera approached him and asked where the locket was. His locket was being fixed by Mako's uncle, who happened to be a locksmith. Onodera's face was kinda disappointed since she really wanted to try the key in it. But before that, Chitogi was acting strange whenever they pretended to be lovey-dovey in front of everyone else in the classroom. They still had to because they were under surveillance for the day. Back in the classroom, their homeroom teacher told them that they could buy photos from the camping trip, which were posted on the bulletin board. Miyamoto pointed out a photo of Ichigo with their backs on. Meanwhile, Mako offered Onodera's picture while sleeping for 500 yen to Ichigo. He didn't even hesitate to think about the money as long as he could have it. As he was still scanning for more pictures, he saw Chitogi's picture, but behind her was Onodera about to change her clothes. He didn't think twice about getting it because he wouldn't allow someone else to see it. However, Onodera bumped into him and saw a picture, but all she could see was Chitogi. On the other hand, he was sweating and nervous that she might find out and would start calling him a pervert. Once again, Onodera's heart ached because of the things Ichigo made her feel, even though it wasn't his intention to do so. When he got home, he asked his father about the pictures 10 years ago. His father told him it was just in the storeroom. At last, the mystery behind the promise and the girl with the key was just a few steps closer. Just when we were so close to finding out the truth, the key snapped. However, I still feel so bad for Onodera and her jumping into conclusions phase. The guy's in love with you, girl. Just calm down. But what if everything would change? Onodera couldn't help but to think that Ichigo was into Chitogi. Meanwhile, he was thinking of framing Onodera's picture. Quite confusing and relatable to some, right? In school, Mako asked Ichigo to stop at a fast food chain in order to have a group study for the upcoming exam. Ichigo was an independent learner, so he didn't have to attend. But as soon as Mako mentioned that Onodera was coming too, he immediately got up from his seat. At the fast food chain, Chitogi was the only one getting excited about it because of her family's wealth. For her status, the store was just a cheap one she wasn't allowed to go to before. Then, Onodera took a glance at Ichigo because he seemed too occupied in his thoughts. He was having a hard time figuring out who among the two girls he made a promise with. When it was time for them to find their seats, Miyamoto suggested that Onodera should sit beside Ichigo so he could tutor her again. However, Onodera declined because he should sit next to his girlfriend. It took a few silent conversations of something happened for Onodera to dismiss her chance, but she must have distanced herself to avoid getting hurt again and again. Sugumi was trained to become a top student aside from her physical abilities in combat, so when she noticed that Ichigo was having a hard time in English, she leaned closer to him and explained the problem easier. Ichigo was confused why she was being unusually nice to him at that moment. When she tucked her hair behind her ears, his heart began pounding. In return, he thanked her, which made her even more flustered. She went back to her seat while Chitogi offered to translate the English dialogue into Japanese. Chitogi started translating some dialogue from a matured drama. Onodera kept laughing that even tears escaped from her eyes. Somehow, Ichigo had a feeling that she gave off the same vibe as the girl from his memories. As for Chitogi, he didn't get the same feeling that she was that girl. But she knew the phrase, Swazian love, and even had a key. If only he could find that photo, this mystery would be solved. Out of the blue, Mako asked him which he liked better. Of course, he would tell them that it was Onodera, but he stopped himself when he realized that Mako was referring to vanilla or chocolate shakes, and not his crush. He managed to fool everyone with his lame excuse, but Onodera noticed it. This made her overthink about the situation again. Miyamoto asked Chitogi what happened to the male character in the drama, so she continued translating it. Ichigo thought that she didn't fit his image of the girl he met years ago. But then, Chitogi was on the part where the translation was, "No, you're wrong about that, George. I am the person you're destined to be with." This made him choke in his drink while still thinking about the possibility of Chitogi as that girl. When he got home, he started looking for the box of photos again. When he found it, an even more twisting plot in his life was revealed before his eyes. He was with an orange-haired girl who held the key while holding hands with him. Surely it wasn't Onodera, nor Chitogi. When he rushed to ask his father about it, he'd already left. At school, he wondered if the girls remembered someone else back then, but he couldn't bring himself to ask since neither of them had a clear memory about it. Afternoon came and the rain was pouring so hard. Chitogi had no umbrella, so Ichigo offered his. But her pride got ahead and so did her feet. She was soaking wet in the rain when he stopped her and shared the umbrella. Ichigo didn't want her to catch a cold, and so he shared his with her. But Ichigo noticed that most of the umbrella was for her and his side was getting wet. So she pushed him so he wouldn't get wet. The two kept arguing even under the pouring rain, and just when she was about to hit him, lightning and thunder struck. Chitogi was down on her feet, holding her knees together. So they stopped at a waiting shed nearby. In order to kill some time, the two of them looked at the photos from the camping trip. Of course, Ichigo was confident that he secured Onodera's photos back home. When Chitogi sorted out his photos, she saw her photos sleeping. He panicked and told her that it was Mako's prank. She believed him because she knew that he wouldn't have the balls to carry around a photo of hers like that. He thought it was strange for her to feel that way. Both of them started to argue again, but she admitted that the fomance thing was starting to seem like a good thing to have. For some reason, he had been feeling that way too. However, Chitogi was just teasing him and she wasn't serious at all. Another lightning struck and she ended up in an awkward position with her hands clinging onto him while their faces were inches apart. At that moment, everything froze. Not until Ichigo's father interrupted them. He knew that he asked the two of them to fake their relationship, but he didn't expect it to be real. The two of them moved away from each other and started being mean again. His father hated to relay the information just when they had gotten closer to each other, but that kid was coming to see him after the day. Ichigo wondered who that kid was. The two of them froze when his father told him about the kid as his fiancé. It's already hard to decipher which among the two girls hold the real key, but then someone just pops up as the fiancé? It seemed like the girl in the photo he made a promise with 10 years ago was the same woman who claimed to be his fiancé. Everything was even more complicated when a transferee student happened to be that woman. Everyone in the class admired how gorgeous that even Chitogi and Onodera praised her. Just then, the girl started hugging Ichigo, calling him her fiancé. But he denied her claim, saying that he had a girlfriend. Chitogi grabbed his arm and Ichigo apologized to Marika because he couldn't be with her. As bold as she was, she stated that she could make him happier rather than a gorilla-like girl. Chitogi was all fired up when Tsugumi pointed a gun at Marika. Tsugumi was angered by her bold behavior, but then it happened that Marika's father was a police commissioner. So the whole police team barged in the room and separated everyone from her and her fiancé. That moment, Ichigo realized the consequences he might face if he would piss her father off. The whole city would fall. Then Marika pretended to fall, claiming that she was extremely frail and would get dizzy all the time, so she asked him to escort her to the infirmary. Ichigo knew she was faking it, but she just grabbed his hand and led the way. In the nurse's room, Marika wanted to plan for their wedding, but he tried his hardest not to fall for it. He then admitted that he never knew that he had a fiancé, not until the other day, and he didn't remember her at all. On top of that, she wouldn't marry a guy that her parents picked out for her. However, Marika was constantly in love with him ever since they were kids. She even remembered what happened 10 years ago as clear as day, and since then, she didn't care for no one but him. When he asked her if she remembered the promise, it was a pause for her, and positively said she did. His eyes widened at the thought of her as the girl in his dreams, but he couldn't believe it. Marika kept telling him to marry her and started getting intimate with him. Ichigo fought hard to stop her, but their voices were getting loud inside that Chitogi could no longer bear to hear. She opened the door and saw him on top of Marika while the latter made it look like they were enjoying it. For some reason she couldn't explain, Chitogi hit him again. She knew that he wouldn't do something like that, but she got pissed at the sight of them. As she was about to apologize, Marika beat her to it. Marika asked him for a date, and if he refused, then her father would be pissed. That was the kind of thing he didn't want to happen. On the day of their date, Miyamoto and Onodera disguised themselves to follow them. Tsugumi did as people were fawning over her model-like beauty. She didn't know that Chitogi herself went on a mission to tail them too. In a fancy restaurant, Marika kept asking about what he liked about his gorilla-like girlfriend. He knew it may not be obvious, but Chitogi had some things going for her. He even told her that they could be good friends. As odd as it may seem, Marika hated girls with long hair even though she had it herself. She stood up and dragged him to the park where they could talk together. Ichigo showed her the photo of them together when they were still kids. He asked her if she was the girl he made a promise to, but Marika was cunning as ever. She would just tell him the truth if he would break up with Chitogi. She showed him the key to even tempt him, but he was a man of honor. He wouldn't do something like that to his girlfriend just for his own selfish reasons. Marika knew all along that they were being followed. When Chitogi heard about what he had said, she blushed. But when Marika called out her presence, she showed herself and reasoned out that she was just doing an infidelity investigation. Marika told him that they should continue kissing even though they didn't. This angered Chitogi and sent him flying again. Marika knew that he would follow Chitogi, so she pretended to have an urgent matter, leaving her bag behind. As expected, he brought the bag to her, but before that, Marika had a conversation with her lady guard about her frail body. He asked him if it was true, but she pretended not to recall that she said something like that. Once again, she asked what he liked about Chitogi. She was foul-mouthed and had a bad temper and violent tendencies. Ichigo told her that she got it all wrong because she wasn't just like that. She had a mind-blowing foul-mouthed and is a 2-bit gangster. She was quick to get mad and even had a power level of a mountain gorilla. She kept exploding for no clear reason, and it seemed like her only agenda was to constantly taunt him. But even so, she had some things going for her. Deep inside, she was someone he could trust. But to Marika, it didn't matter as long as he remembered her, but even the slightest bit of his memory, he just couldn't. This angered Marika, and she showed her true colors. She started thrashing him with how she worked so hard to change herself into someone he would like, but he couldn't remember her at all, and that pissed her off. At that moment, Ichigo remembered her through her accent. She was someone he used to call Mary. If only he would remember her in that way of speaking, then she should have done it in the first place. It was summer 10 years ago when he met a frail girl named Mary. He used to visit her every day to play, but when her father noticed how she got fond of him, he offered to wed them in the future. But in Ichigo's case, he wasn't aware of it at all. Ichigo, Chitogi, Onodera, and Marika talked about how they all had a promise to a boy 10 years ago, and how there were 3 keys to the locket. One of them must be the one he made a promise to, but Marika was overly confident that it was her. Meanwhile, Ichigo was in love with Onodera at the moment, and so he didn't know what to do. Mary invited him to her home in order to talk to her dad about it. Chitogi was kinda territorial for a moment, but they didn't have any choice unless they would sacrifice to burn the whole city. In her house, her father was a good man but a scary one. At first, Ichigo kept sugarcoating everything so as not to make her father angry. But when they were alone, her father was rather a protective man who just wanted his daughter to be happy. Ichigo admitted that he was in love with a girl for too long, but when he got asked if it was his girlfriend, he told him that she wasn't the one. This kinda pissed the father off, but he totally understood the situation. However, still in the future, he should marry his daughter. When Ichigo went outside the room, Marika was flustered by Ichigo's compliment that she was cute the way she was, that she should not change anything just to be liked. Out of embarrassment, Marika ran away and called her father, saying that Ichigo was making advances. Her father was quick to respond. In Chitogi's mansion, Claude asked her what was wrong, but then Chitogi was too frustrated to answer while sipping her drink in a bikini outfit. It's confirmed! Chitogi is getting jealous. After the school's closing ceremony for the semester, Kozaki went up to Ichigo and asked him if he was free the next day. A surprised reaction was evident on his face, and he absolutely assumed that she was asking him to go on a date, but he was wrong. It turned out that Kozaki's mom needed part-timers for their restaurant. That was why Kozaki asked him. Ichigo couldn't contain his happiness. He immediately agreed to take the part-time job and repeatedly thanked Kozaki for the opportunity. The next day, Ichigo went to the restaurant only to see a scary-looking woman who was constantly nagging. It was Kozaki's mom. She immediately saw Ichigo and asked him why he was there. His knees began to wobble as nervousness kicked in. He was about to introduce himself when Kozaki came. She informed her mom that Ichigo was their new part-timer. However, before Kozaki's mom agreed to it, she demanded that Ichigo should try to cook first to see if he was fit for the job. Onodera's mom was carefully watching Ichigo cooking, and she could clearly tell that he wasn't new to it. The way he cooked, mixed, and even washed the ingredients tell us that he wasn't a newbie, and it was further proved by Ichigo the moment she tasted his dish. In that very second, she immediately welcomed him as their new part-timer. Kozaki's mother left them to take care of the shop for the rest of the day. Kozaki began to tour Ichigo around the shop and even directed step by step on how he should make their dishes. While directing, Ichigo praised her, telling her how amazing she was for remembering those. She shared with him that watching people cook was her hobby before that, and that was why she could remember the directions but couldn't really execute them. There was a time that she tried cooking, however, people ended up being food poisoned because of it, which led to their store being closed for 3 days. As time went by, Ichigo was loving the vibe of the store and seemed like he was going to love working there. An old man went into the shop. It was their all-time customer, Mr. Yoshino. He went to buy the usual product that he had always bought, and even joked about going on a date with Onodera, which made Ichigo fuming with anger. The old man left, and he still couldn't wrap around his thoughts how an old man like him could still flirt around like that. Out of nowhere, Kozaki struck a question, asking him if he was still going on dates with Chitagoi. Surprised by what he heard, he started making excuses, but it was too late. She already knew the truth that they were in a fake relationship since Chitagoi told her. This irritated the heck out of Ichigo, but a sudden idea popped out of his mind. An idea of confessing his feelings towards Kozaki, but it wasn't that simple. He has to wait for the right time. Suddenly, Kozaki's mom called, telling them that she couldn't go home due to the heavy rain caused by the typhoon and that they should just look out for the shop. She also asked Ichigo to just stay in the shop since it would be hard for him to go home, which means both of them would be spending the night together. This drove Ichigo nuts. Different questions surfaced in his head. Was that for real? Should he be doing that? However, no matter how much he thought of it, it was still wrong. He couldn't just spend the night at a girl's house when she was all alone. He went out in an attempt to go home, but the wind was so strong that he couldn't even continue. Kozaki tried to calm and compose herself the entire time. Trying to strike up a conversation, she suddenly asked him to talk over and decide what to do in her room. The moment they went to her room, silence filled the place. A sudden situation like that was pretty nerve-wracking for both of them. Normally, they wouldn't have had any problem talking with each other, but it was pretty different that time. Realizing the situation that they were in, Ichigo asked her if she still had their yearbook from 9th grade in an attempt to have a topic. While having fun looking at the yearbook photo, the rain suddenly stopped, which meant that Ichigo had to go home. Disappointment was evident on his face, and why did the rain stop right at the very moment they were enjoying their time together? He wanted to stay longer. When he was about to go home, he wondered when he would get to talk to her again since the part-time job was only for that day. That was why he bravely asked for her email and smiled like crazy on his way home, knowing that he can finally talk with the girl he likes anytime through email. Festival day. While other teenagers were enjoying the food stands and games around the area, Ichigo was helping out with the food stands. In the middle of cooking, he started packing snacks for the guys on the other stands, which made the other guys awe on how thoughtful he was. While walking to give the snacks, he reminded himself of his plan for that night, which was to obtain the Super Ultra Matchmaking item for romantic relationships, since it was popular for its effectiveness and sells out minutes after it goes on sale. Suddenly, he bumped into someone. It was Chitagoi. An obvious disappointment was painted on their faces. It was clear that they were sick of seeing each other. Out of nowhere, the guy who was from Ichigo's food stand followed him and asked him to give beers to other guys. But when he noticed that Ichigo was with Chitagoi, whom he knew as Ichigo's girlfriend, he asked Ichigo to leave the work behind and enjoy the rest of the festival. This left Ichigo no choice since the guy went back without giving him any chance to explain. Chitogi was enjoying the whole time they were roaming around the festival. She even let Ichigo play a game for her wherein she asked him to catch a fish, and he did. A lot of people were amazed by how skillful he was in catching those fish. Little did they know, Kozaki and Tachibana were secretly following them all around. While roaming around, Ichigo noticed a whole lot of people were standing outside a store. There, he remembered that it was the store that sells relationship charms. He hurriedly went there but was concerned by the huge crowd. Out of nowhere, Chitogi held his hand so they wouldn't get separated. But why did he feel self-conscious all of a sudden? He came there to buy a relationship charm for Kozaki, but why did his heart pound like crazy the moment she held his hand? What does it mean? Right at that very moment, he got the relationship charm. He was separated from Chitogi. He saw a hand trying to reach him, which he thought was Chitogi, but it was Kozaki. As their eyes met, shock surfaced on their faces. Given this scenario, does this mean that the relationship charm was starting to work? The love story that they've been waiting for, was it finally starting to happen? Although Ichigo was with Kozaki, he couldn't seem to get off his worries for Chitogi. That was why he scanned all around in hopes of seeing her. When his charm fell on the ground, Kozaki picked it up, but her slipper suddenly broke. Seeing the condition that she was in, he offered her some piggyback rides. Happiness was shown in her eyes, although she was blushing so much out of embarrassment. After fixing Onodora's slippers, they noticed that the charm suddenly disappeared. It turned out that a cat stole it and ran away. Ichigo ran after it but couldn't seem to catch it. However, the charm fell right in front of Chitogi. As she noticed Ichigo, who was running, she asked him if that charm was his. When he looked at her, blush was evident on his face. He was kind of surprised to see her wearing a yukata. It looked good on her. While Chitogi was walking behind Ichigo, she saw a sign saying that if a man gives a relationship charm to a woman, it means he's proposing. Ichigo, who knew nothing about it, suddenly gave the charm to her. It made her flustered all of a sudden while her face turned slightly red. She was completely confused with his actions. However, the moment he saw the sign, he hurriedly explained that giving those charms to her didn't mean anything for him. On a sunny day, Ichigo, together with Chitogi and some other friends, went to the beach to have some fun. In the middle of playing games, Chitogi took some time off to rest. She still couldn't forget what happened during the festival and thought what she would do if that was a proposal. She immediately erased those ideas from her mind. Something that ridiculous would never happen in a million years. To divide the tasks for dinner preparation, the group of friends decided to partner with each other to easily execute the tasks. Ichigo partnered with Chitogi, and they started to buy some ingredients and slice them. In the middle of slicing, both of them accidentally touched each other's hands, which made both of them flustered. Chitogi was deeply confused with what she felt as their hands touched. Why was she feeling weird all of a sudden when she was already used to touching his hands when they were still pretending to be a couple? Does this mean something else? In the middle of slicing, Chitogi accidentally cut herself. Ichigo offered her some help, but she was pretty hard-headed and refused, when suddenly he held her hand and put some band-aid to the wound. Her face turned red the moment she felt his hands touch her skin. She couldn't even look at him. Even a mere sight of him can cause her such embarrassment. After dinner, Ichigo was enjoying the calm view of the sea when Kozaki appeared out of nowhere. They began to enjoy talking about different things, and joy and laughter were evident on their faces. This later on made Kozaki realize that whenever she talked to Ichigo, she was feeling even more alive. She really liked him a lot to the point that she wished for that moment to go on forever. Chitogi went to look for Ichigo and Kozaki. When she was about to reach them, she heard Kozaki asking Ichigo if it was alright to kiss him. Kozaki was even more flustered by what she had just said. Why did she say that? Was that just a thought that suddenly crossed her mind? What was she gonna do? They had such a nice vibe going on, but her imagination just started to go wild. She was so worried that Ichigo might think that she was weird, but Ichigo, on the other hand, didn't even hear what she had said since he fell asleep for a bit. With such humiliation that she had experienced, she hurriedly headed back to her friends and calmed herself. After seeing what happened from a distance, Chitogi thought that she must have misheard what Kozaki said, since she thought that Kozaki wasn't someone who would just say something like that. Ichigo noticed her and asked what she was doing, avoiding having even more contact with him. She said that it was nothing and went back to their friends right away. The next day, while building a sandcastle, Chitogi shared her story to Kozaki about how her friend suddenly felt different and got flustered easily whenever she was with that guy. While listening to her, Kozaki concluded that her friend probably had a crush on that guy. This gained a huge reaction from Chitogi. At first, she was in denial and didn't want to believe it. But we all can see here that it was kinda true. Her reactions towards him all made sense. While others were playing with sparklers by the sea, Chitogi seemed to be nowhere. That was why Ichigo started looking for her, only to find her by the rock pavements, looking at the sea while having some deep thoughts. He sat next to her, asking what was wrong, when a sudden question was asked to him. Will they work out if they were truly dating? That was a question that he was hesitant to answer, but he did anyway. He told her that they wouldn't work out since she wasn't his type. She was not graceful and sweet, rather she was violent. Hearing those words coming from him, Chitogi felt like a poisonous dagger struck her heart. She couldn't help it. She aggressively shouted at him to shut up, which surprised him. He'd never seen her react that way before. He tried to reach out to her, but before he could even say something, she stood up and ran away. And that's how their summer vacation ended. Ichigo and Chitogi didn't say a single word to each other. Ichigo and Kozaki were picked to play Romeo and Juliet, and both of them couldn't contain their happiness knowing that they secretly like each other and were going to act it out together. However, despite that, he couldn't stop thinking about Chitogi. After the dismissal, Ichigo ran after Chitogi and asked about what was happening. He did something wrong towards her that resulted in her acting that certain way, but all he got was a cold reply from her saying that it was all nothing and to stop acting friendly towards her when they were not even in public. This drove Ichigo to go nuts. He was so confused with the way she reacted and didn't know what to do. All he wanted was to check up on her since he was so worried for her. At the teacher's office, Kozaki noticed a photo in which she was seen in the background with her underwear on. It turned out that Ichigo gave it to the teacher since it was too provocative and other students may see it. The practice seemed to be not doing good. The people who were playing different roles were not even serious in practicing, especially Tachibana, who was just disrupting the play. While practicing, Ichigo saw Chitogi walking with her classmates. Right there and then, he decided to make up his mind not to think about her anymore and just focus on the play. Dashing costumes made by the amazing sewing club, Ichigo looked ravishing as he wore his prince costume. Right when his eyes landed on Onodera, he couldn't help but be stunned at how beautiful she was. With her skin as pale as snow and her hair as black as charcoal, it perfectly matches the dress she was wearing. But despite her standing in front of him, Ichigo still wondered how Chitogi would look wearing that exact dress. While Chitogi was walking in the hallway, Ichigo ran after her to inform her that Four Eyes were becoming suspicious of them, and that they should act like they were a couple once again. But Chitogi disagreed. She didn't want to pursue the act anymore. She wanted nothing to do with him. And that was also the reason she didn't pursue the role of Juliet. She wanted to go back to what they were before, strangers. The shock was evident on Ichigo's face as thoughts began to surface. He even questioned if Chitogi felt that way all this time because with her he felt like having to fake being her boyfriend. Finding out that they already met years ago, he felt like they already have a connection. He thought that she felt the same way lately. Ichigo's aura changed into much darker. He began provoking her, telling them that what they had way back then was all nothing but fake, and that the memory of that day 10 years ago was a mere understanding of her old man's part. At the very least, there was no way Chitogi was the girl he made a promise to. If both of them couldn't even get along now, there was no way it would have worked for them. A huge slap hit his face, disallowing him to finish his sentence. Fuming with anger, Chitogi couldn't take it anymore and left him there all alone. At the cultural festival, Ichigo and Kozaki were preparing for their play when suddenly one of the staff fell from the stairs. In an attempt to help, Kozaki ended up spraining her leg and she was no longer able to do the play. But Ichigo couldn't allow this. He couldn't allow all of the efforts that other people poured into the play to vanish. That was why he ran to look for Chitogi, since he knew she would pull this play off with him. As his eyes sighted Chitogi, his cheeks suddenly reddened. Well, it couldn't be helped. She looked like a princess. The play started, but right at the very beginning, there was already something wrong. The entire play was chaotic. Instead of a sad dramatic love story, it happened to be a comedic love story due to the cast's personal feelings that even Claude and Marika's policemen went in. But still, they were able to pull it off and the audience loved what they did. Sitting while watching the beautiful blue sky, Ichigo and Chitogi were talking about the play when all of a sudden, Chitogi apologized. She was sorry for her terrible behavior, for saying awful things, and for slapping him across the face. She promised him that she would be going back to her usual self, and that was why she would greatly appreciate it if he would forgive her. Shocked by the sudden change in Chitogi's behavior, Ichigo didn't see any reason for him not to forgive her. All he wanted was for them to go back to what they were before. People started greeting them the moment they went back to the classroom. They were praising them for their hard work and how amazing they were when it comes to acting. This shows that despite the flow and script not being followed and the chaos in the play, a lot of people still had a lot of fun watching the play. When Ichigo noticed Kozaki, they talked about how the play went. He somehow noticed how she really wanted to play Juliet but was robbed of the chance due to unfortunate events. To make her experience being Juliet, he brought her to the rooftop wearing both of their costumes. As the sun was setting, they acted the play once again while looking into each other's eyes, all alone on the rooftop as the darkness slowly emerged. Another morning started, but there was something new now because Chitogi finally recognized that she likes Ichigo. People said that when you liked someone, the world started to look totally different. But it wasn't the case for her, since she hadn't noticed any significant changes at all. Looking at Ichigo, who was sitting beside her, made her realize that the romance that she had ever wanted was forced to share with him. It was good that she knew she was in love with him, but how did she really want it to turn out? Given that she liked him, does that mean that she also wanted to date him or something? Or even be his real girlfriend? Different questions filled her head to the point that she was even stressed out. In the school garden, Ichigo showed to Chitogi, Kozaki, and Tachibana that she finally had his locket back. Tachibana ran towards him and attempted to open his locket so they would already know who his first love was. But Chitogi stopped them and said that it wasn't the right time to open it yet, and there was no need to rush, but the truth was, she was scared to know who that was. Kozaki, on the other hand, thought that it was best if they would open it right away. Although that may be something that happened when they were kids, she still wanted to know who that was. Ichigo was overwhelmed with different opinions coming from the girls, but no matter how much he also wanted to open the locket, he couldn't since it was still broken, and he had to find a way to open it without breaking it. At the classroom, Chitogi was talking with her classmates when she noticed that her lips were dry due to the winter season. Her classmate let her borrow her lip gloss and even gave it to her since she looked good on it, and even joked that it would make Ichigo go weak at the knees. The next morning, while Chitogi was walking with Ichigo on their way to school, she tried too hard to make him notice her lips, hoping that he would compliment it, but he was so dense. He didn't even notice that she put some lip gloss on the lips. Since the lip gloss didn't work, the next day she used different shampoo, hoping that he would notice the difference in the smell. However, this didn't work either. In her bedroom, she was thinking about what happened and realized that even girls didn't always notice lip gloss or shampoo. No wonder Ichigo didn't notice it either. She couldn't blame him for that. She had to make it more obvious, and that was why she decided to do her nails, hoping he would notice. However, even with such pretty nails, Ichigo didn't notice, which devastated Chitogi. That was why she decided to make a much more obvious step. She started wearing different ribbons, hoping that he would finally spot the obvious difference. However, no matter how hard she tried to make him notice, it seemed like Ichigo was too dense. Frustration was clear on Chitogi's face. She tried so hard to make him notice the difference in her hopes of some compliment, but it seemed so hard making a dense person do it. While walking on their way home, Chitogi forcefully asked Ichigo what he noticed about her the past few days. It turned out that he actually noticed that she was wearing lip gloss 3 days ago, but didn't actually point it out to her. This drew a smile on her face, knowing that she had actually succeeded in making him notice those things. While Ichigo was talking with Tsugumi, a sudden gunshot appeared. Thankfully, Tsugumi was quick enough to push Ichigo. She then proceeded to fight the girl who attempted to shoot her while Ichigo tried to stop them with bare hands, resulting in him having minor injuries. In Tsugumi's place, she introduced the girl to him. It turned out that the girl she fought with was her former colleague, Paula McCoy. She came to settle a score with Tsugumi. Since the day Tsugumi usurped her status as #1, she held on to her as an example, but seeing how Tsugumi currently was made her sorely disappointed. For the last few days that she was watching her, she had observed the way Tsugumi lived her current life like a girl next door living a complacent, degenerate life. That was why Paula came, since she couldn't let Tsugumi go down like that. Before she went back to America, Paula challenged Tsugumi in a duel wherein the first one who could kiss Ichigo will be the one who wins. The moment Paula lifted Ichigo's chin, Tsugumi blasted a gunshot. Ichigo tried to get away from both of them as he heard gunshots approaching, but Paula was running behind him, and Tsugumi was already standing in front of him. Tsugumi went closer to him and attempted to kiss him, but she couldn't really do it. Taking advantage of the situation, Paula threw a smoke screen and brought Ichigo inside the basement. In the basement, Ichigo was feeling anxious about what Paula may do, when suddenly a huge explosion broke the entrance. It was Tsugumi, a murderous aura surrounding her which surprised the both of them. In just a blink of an eye, she was nowhere to be found when out of nowhere she kicked the huge pole, causing it to break. That was when Paula realized that Tsugumi didn't lose her edge at all. What she was showing that moment was even better than before. Suddenly, Tsugumi went in front of Ichigo. She leaned in closer as their eyes met. She put her fingers on his lips and kissed it. It was her own version of stealing a kiss from his lips. Although it was indirect, Paula gave no instructions that it should be direct. In the end, Tsugumi knew that all Paula wanted was to be acknowledged by her, and that was what she did. She told her how proud she was of her and her achievements, which made Paula burst into tears. That was what she had wanted to hear from her all this time. Christmas was around the corner. Students' eyes were filled with excitement as they planned on what to do during Christmas. However, that wasn't the case for Chitogi. Nervousness was evident on her face. As the sun set on their way home, they stopped by the park. Ichigo asked why she didn't seem to be excited knowing that Christmas was coming. It was because her mom was coming that day. She was supposed to be happy, right? But for her, it didn't work that way. Her mom was a CEO who owned multiple companies all over the world and dedicated her time and was constantly traveling to manage those. That was why Chitogi barely felt that she had a mother. She didn't really know what it felt like to have a mother who was always by her side, and besides that, she was also scared of her mother. Ichigo felt sorry for her. He didn't know that that was what she was going through. In the middle of their talk, her dad called informing her that her mother would go home tomorrow, and the worst part was, he wanted her to introduce Ichigo to her mother. Her face turned pale. She didn't know what to do. All of those happened so suddenly. Everyone was busy. Servants were all over the place panicking while doing their best to make everything perfect because Ma'am Hana was coming home. While watching the servants get ready, Chitogi warned Ichigo to not do anything funny in front of her mom and keep his best behavior, or else something he wouldn't like will happen. This made Ichigo's legs wobble. Was that how scary her mother really was? A woman with a black hair tied in a ponytail got out of the car. It was Chitogi's mother. She looked younger than expected and could even pass as Chitogi's older sister. Her husband immediately greeted her as he hugged her. They shared a sweet moment together when suddenly she remembered the thing that she asked him to do a month ago. She asked him if he had done it, but unfortunately he didn't. She was disappointed and asked the butlers to lock him in the library as a punishment. She suddenly turned her attention to Chitogi, who looked anxious but still greeted her and eventually introduced Ichigo as her boyfriend. She proceeded to ask Chitogi about her academic ranking and was deeply dismayed the moment she knew that Chitogi was ranked 5 in the entire school. Hearing how dismayed her mother was, Chitogi didn't know how to react. The only thing she was sure of was she was devastated. She noticed the ribbon that Chitogi wore. It was the ribbon that she gave her when she was a kid. A ribbon like it meant nothing for her. She asked her to buy as many as she can since it was completely frayed and be more stylish with her looks. Before Madame Hana exited, her bodyguard informed her that another secretary collapsed. It was a huge problem since there was no backup to be assigned as her secretary, who works in a 72-hour shift because of all of them were in the hospital. Her eyes landed on Ichigo, and she suddenly appointed him to be her secretary until Christmas, which surprised all of them. How did that happen? That couldn't be happening. Chitogi tried to stop her mother, but Madame Flower's mind was already fixed. She did that as a way for Ichigo to gain her acknowledgement and to prove that he was worthy to be her daughter's boyfriend. And if he managed to prove it, she would reward them a night in an exclusive suite at a 5-star hotel on Christmas Eve, which gained a flustered reaction from the two. Ichigo wasn't able to protest with it since 2 bodyguards held his arms and guided him to the car. Working as Madame Hana's secretary was even harder than it sounded. Long list of schedules and tasks awaited Ichigo. Even an errand with an unimaginable deadline was assigned to him. No wonder a lot of secretaries collapsed because of that work. In hopes of spending Christmas Eve together, Chitogi called her mom in an attempt to invite her. However, before she can even do it, her mom told her she would be spending that day with work. This made her depressed. All her life, she barely spent time with her mother. She didn't feel like she had one. Was work more important? Couldn't she sacrifice a day to spend it with her daughter? Does she even value her daughter? Thoughts filled up Chitogi's mind, wondering if she even mattered to her mother. Ichigo's hard work paid off. Despite the stress due to the continuous errands that were given to him, he managed to be acknowledged by Madame Hana. She offered to give him a bonus, but instead of receiving it, he wanted her to do something else, and that was to spend Christmas Eve with Chitogi. He did all the tasks that she assigned and even adjusted her schedule so she would have time to spend with her daughter, but she didn't want to. But Ichigo was pretty persuasive. He even bought a gift for Chitogi on behalf of Hana. Hana told him he didn't really have to because she already had one. The moment she opened her drawer, dozens of gifts appeared. These were the gifts that she didn't get to give to her daughter. She never forgot to buy one every Christmas. She wanted to, but chose not to give it because she thought her daughter hated her and didn't want to spend Christmas with her. But this was the complete opposite. Chitogi yearned for her mother's love and wanted to spend Christmas with her. That was Ichigo's last straw. He immediately went outside to search for Chitogi so they would spend Christmas Eve together, even if there was only a bit of time left. Cold breeze hit her skin. As she watched the snow fall, Chitogi reminisced her childhood memories with her mom. Will she ever experience being completely vulnerable with her again? Will she ever experience having a normal mother and daughter experience with her? She missed it. She missed her. She missed what they had before. Out of nowhere, a loud voice calling her suddenly appeared. It was Ichigo. He walked towards her and forced her to get into the car. On their way there, they were caught up with the traffic, and that was why Ichigo borrowed a bicycle from a random person and used it so they would arrive at the hotel on time. But by the time they arrived there, Madame Hana was gone. They hurriedly went to the airport, but by the time they arrived, Madame Hana's plane had already flown. Filled with so much anger, Ichigo called her, then asked her to come back and stop blaming everything on her work. He suddenly passed her phone to Chitogi. The moment she uttered the word mama, reality hit Madame Hana. Why was she being like that? Why was she running away from her daughter? Why was she continuously working instead of giving time for her? Without any hesitation, the plane turned and landed right away. Madame Hana went out of it. Their eyes met. It was full of longing and the eagerness of wanting to be with each other. Hana spoke, asking Chitogi if she still loved her. Chitogi still loved her mom even though she was scared, even though she never got to see her, even though all she did was to yell at her, even though she never looked at her, and even though she was terrified of her, she still loved her. Hearing all of this coming from her daughter, tears fell from Madame Hana's eyes as she ran towards her daughter for a hug. After years of keeping how they truly felt, the time has finally come where they were able to pour it all out. All of these happened thanks to Ichigo, who invested so much effort to help both of them. Madame Hana and Chitogi spent their time enjoying each other's company. In the middle of talking, Hana handed her a gift to Chitogi. It was a new hair accessory. Chitogi liked it, but she chose to keep using her old ribbon instead. There, Hana remembered that Ichigo was the reason why Chitogi uses that ribbon. 10 years ago, she was reading wherein a girl was wearing a red ribbon. Ichigo came up to her and told her that she would look even prettier if she wore a ribbon too. And because of that, she kept on begging her mom to buy one. Next day, Ichigo and Chitogi sent Madame Hana off the airport, but before she finally went to the boarding area, she thanked Ichigo for what he had done. If it weren't because of him, she wouldn't get along with her daughter. She even whispered to him that he knew they were only pretending to be lovers all along, which made him flustered. He felt embarrassed and stupid for going all out when she knew it was all fake all along. But was it really nothing but a sham? Was his feelings for Chitogi really fake? Hana doubted that. A group gathered in front of the bulletin board because the current student ranking was posted. Various emotions filled the place. Some were happy because they ranked higher, some were devastated due to their lower rank. However, that wasn't the case for Tachibana. Normally, students would feel depressed being placed in the lower rank, but she felt nothing about it despite being in rank 185 out of 207. Ichigo, together with Chitogi, decided to help her out in studying since she had a math quiz the next day. Even at first, it was pretty visible that Tachibana wasn't really taking it at all seriously, since she was just continuously fooling around. That was why he asked her how she entered the school if she was taking it all too lightly. It was because she pulled off an all-nighter the night before the entrance exam and passed it. That proved she wasn't stupid, she just lacked the motivation to study. Ichigo and Chitogi tried their very best in tutoring Tachibana and didn't notice that all of them dozed off and slept. However, despite the effort they exerted in teaching her, can you believe it that Tachibana still did not pass the quiz and had to retake it once again? It was so close to passing, she only lacked 2 points. The next morning, Tachibana went to Ichigo's house to drop by her parrot since she had to go somewhere with her family for a few days. Ichigo gladly took her parrot in and even spent the whole night teaching the parrot different words to imitate. However, the next morning, the cage was open and it was nowhere to be found. He went outside. He wanted to shout the parrot's name, but it was so embarrassing, Tachibana naming it the same as him. He was running around looking for it when he suddenly heard something. It was the parrot saying provocative things that were surely thought by its owner. But before he finally caught it, he had to go through so much embarrassment. He had to shout, "Tachibana Marika, I love you," before the parrot flew towards him. Right at the moment he had the parrot, a car stopped and Tachibana went out. It turned out that this was all her plan. She wanted him to shout it all over the town while she was secretly recording. Ichigo ended up feeling overwhelmed with embarrassment because of what she did. February 14th, and it was Valentine's Day. Love air was all over the place, and the students confessing and giving out chocolates to each other. Ichigo was in the classroom, slightly disappointed since he wanted to experience receiving chocolate from a girl, but no one did. He went to see Meiko, only to witness Tsugumi giving him chocolates. He was about to return to his classroom when suddenly Tachibana appeared pushing a huge sculpture of him. Flustered by what he saw, he hurriedly ran away while Tachibana was pushing the sculpture as she chased him. Seeing Tachibana's gift for Ichigo, Kozaki decided to step up her game too. She stopped Ichigo to give the gift, but before she could even give it, she fell on the floor. She ran away holding the gift, and she couldn't give it to him, not when it was crushed in pieces. While looking for Kozaki, Ichigo saw Tsugumi running after Meiko. She asked why she was running after him, which was all because Meiko made fun of her by saying that those girls gave chocolates to her because she hates her, in which he also gave those chocolates to Meiko because she also felt that way. Realizing that even a girl like Tsugumi receives chocolate during Valentine's made him sulk even more. He also wanted to experience this. Seeing the desperation of Ichigo, she went to her pocket and got a piece of chocolate. As blush started to appear on her face, she slowly handed it to Ichigo, saying that there was an obligatory chocolate system. She did this to lift up his mood, which was pretty successful. So much happiness was visible on his eyes the moment he received that chocolate, he couldn't thank her enough for making him experience those things and for being the first person to give him chocolate, even though it was just obligatory. While walking in the hallway, he saw huge chocolate pieces everywhere, and the moment he landed his eyes to where it came from, he saw Tachibana looking hopeless as she was sitting beside the chocolate sculpture that she made, which was all broken. He felt guilty. If only he didn't run away, something like that wouldn't have happened. He wouldn't have let her efforts go away. That was why he still ate it. Despite being broken to pieces, he still wanted her to know that he appreciated what she did for him and was thankful for her efforts. Before the day ended, Chitogi went to give the chocolates that she made for Ichigo. It didn't taste that good, but he managed to act like it was delicious, since he didn't want her to feel bad. Despite it not being one of the best, he was still thankful for the effort that she exerted. On her way home, Chitogi tried to taste the chocolate that she made, and she was surprised by the taste. It was horrible. It turned out that she used salt instead of sugar. When he still couldn't find Kazaki, Ichigo decided to go home when suddenly someone called him. It was Kazaki. She ran towards him as she shyly gave him another slice of cake that she made. His cheeks reddened. Was it really for him? He still couldn't believe that Kozaki was giving him chocolates. It was homemade, and without any hesitation, he ate it. As he savored it, it felt like the flavors were partying in his mouth. It was surprisingly good. He'd never eaten a chocolate that good. This made Kozaki happy, since she had never made anything that good before in her life. The thought that Kozaki made that chocolate for him made his blood rush through his cheeks. A chocolate from his crush? Really? How lucky can he be? Spring season began as cherry blossoms were starting to bloom. A girl with a side ponytail named Haru was on her way to school when 4 big guys stopped her. Her legs began to wobble and fear began to rise the moment she felt that these guys meant harm for her. As they began to harass her, she suddenly felt dizzy. Her vision began to blur, but before she fainted, she saw a silhouette of a man. It was Ichigo. He then asked the guys to stop scaring the girl, but they didn't listen to him. Suddenly, servants from Ichigo's house came since he forgot something. The moment the 4 big guys saw Ichigo's servants, fear began to build up and they ran away. It turned out that the girl went to the same school as him. He couldn't just leave her lying on the streets, and that was why he brought her to their school's clinic. After what happened, Haru was pretty determined that the guy who saved her was her Prince Charming, and would do her best to find him. While walking in the hallway, bringing a lot of papers in her hand, a big guy stumbled upon her. Papers scattered everywhere. She began to collect it when suddenly a guy helped her. It was Ichigo. She had no idea who he was, but was very thankful he helped her in collecting the papers. While walking on their way to the faculty room, Ichigo offered to lend her some help if she would need some, since she was still a freshman and might need some. In the middle of their conversation, Haru shared that a guy helped her earlier and wanted to thank him personally. Ichigo was aware that it was him, but didn't want to say it since he didn't want her to feel that she owed him something. Suddenly, someone called Ichigo, and the moment Haru knew that he was Ichigo, her face was painted with shock. She was overly surprised that he was Ichigo, who was known as the son of the leader of Shoigumi Yakuza, who despite having a drop-dead gorgeous girlfriend, has a harem of pretty girls at his beck and call. Haru was so caught up with the rumors that she heard to the point that she assumed all of Ichigo's good deeds towards her were driven by his intention to get into her pants. She didn't even bother to listen to his explanation. Suddenly, Kozaki came, and Haru ran towards her and warned Ichigo to never ever come for her sister. He was surprised. He didn't know that Haru was Kozaki's sister. First day of school finally ended. Haru went to the bulletin board to find a club to join. One club caught her interest. It was an animal care club. When she entered the animal shelter in her school, she saw Ichigo, who was talking to a goose while feeding it, telling the goose that he hopes for Kozaki to come so they could go home together. Fuming anger built up in her system. She instantly went up to him and warned him to never ever talk to her sister when suddenly the goose playing with her skirt caused it to go up. Ichigo accidentally saw her underwear. Due to the anger and embarrassment that she felt, Haru couldn't help but punch his face. While taking a bath together, Kozaki asked Haru to not be so harsh towards Ichigo. What she knew was all rumors about him, and the truth was he was a very kind man. He was thoughtful, he was always thinking about others, and if he saw someone in trouble, he couldn't just stand by. He didn't worry about what would happen to him, and he was happy as long as the person he helped was happy. That was the kind of guy he was. But despite these explanations, Haru remained unfazed. After taking a bath, Haru was still thinking about the man who helped her, when suddenly she remembered the clue that would help in finding that man, and it would be the man's locket. Kozaki's mom was having a problem. 2 of their staff were not available and they had no one to substitute. Suddenly, she remembered Ichigo and asked Kozaki to ask if he was available. The next day, Ichigo came, and the moment he stepped inside the store, Haru's blood began to boil. He couldn't contain his hate towards Ichigo. That was why Kozaki tried to get her to be friends with him. In the middle of making pastries, Kozaki left the 2 of them and made some excuse that she was going to shop for some ingredients. While in the kitchen, it was pretty clear how much Haru hated him. She warned him once again to never approach Kozaki, and even brought up the rumors that she had heard about him. In an attempt to ease her hatred towards him, Ichigo tried to explain his side and even tried to tell her that he was the one who saved her from those guys who were harassing her. However, instead of thanking him, she hated him even more. She labeled him as a liar who was trying to wreck his prince's image. Ichigo gave up. He didn't want to worsen the situation and just accepted that that was how Haru viewed him. He asked Haru what he could help with, but Haru, who was irritated with his mere existence, asked him to do nothing but sit, which he did. While watching Haru cook, Ichigo couldn't help but be amazed and even complimented her on how skillful she was. He could really tell that she loved what she was doing. The way she handled her tools and the way each and every step was so polished, he thought that was amazing. He even bet that the things she made were really good. But Haru thought, what could he know about it? He was just probably offering some lip service which would never make her happy at all. Wanting to help out, Ichigo stood up and made his way to the kitchen counter. He started doing his work while not getting in Haru's way. While watching him, Haru noticed the way he moves. It was not amateurish. He really knew what he was doing. Out of curiosity, she asked him if he was making Japanese desserts at home too. He did, ever since he tried to work part-time in their store, and he had really gotten into it. The moment she tasted it, her mouth welcomed the exquisite degree of sweetness and silky smooth texture. Ichigo shared that he used the stuffed mochi from Suzumiya as a reference, which quickly gained interest in her, and that was how their talk about Suzumiya mochi began, but was shortly cut off when Haru noticed that she was starting to ease up on him. Her hot temper towards him went back right when she realized what she was doing. Haru was about to transfer the piles of mochi when Ichigo noticed that it was about to fall because of how heavy it was. He was at her back assisting her while his hands were accidentally touching hers. She was flustered. Her cheeks reddened, realizing the position that they were in. She asked him to leave her, but he couldn't. If he did, those piles of mochi might fall. Surprised by the sudden presence of Kozaki, Haru accidentally let go, which caused it to fall on the floor. The moment she heard the commotion, their mom rushed in the kitchen only to witness the piles of mochi scattered on the floor. Her blood rushed. Fuming anger was evident on her face. She ended up scolding Ichigo and Haru, who showed irresponsibility in their work. After class, Ichigo was alone in their classroom when suddenly his teacher came. She looked for other students, but they went home already. That was why she asked him to do her some favor instead. It turned out that she completely forgot that her job was to assign students to clean the school's pool. She asked Ichigo to ask some of his friends out to help him clean it. The cleaning day began. His usual friends, Haru and Paula McCoy, came. They were having so much fun while cleaning to the point that it didn't even feel like a chore anymore. After hours of cleaning, they finally ate their snacks. Haru noticed that Paula didn't join them. Instead, she was sitting in the tree branches watching them enjoy their food. Haru climbed up to join her, and she noticed how Paula looked at Tsugumi. She then shared that Kozaki was her older sister, and she did admire her a lot. She wondered if Paula felt like it towards Tsugumi. Feeling pissed, Paula asked her to stop paying so much attention to her since that was none of her business. While the others were playing at the pool, Paula was hiding in the bush while silently watching them. Suddenly, a bucket of water was splashed on her. Enraged, she turned around to see who did it. It was Ichigo. He noticed that she was just watching them having fun. That was why he asked her to join, since it was pretty obvious that she also wanted to. Also, she told him that she wanted to learn more about the world that normal people live in before. And that was why Ichigo thought that it was a perfect opportunity to join them and try to blend in. Paula's face was painted with worries. She didn't know how to blend in. She had no idea how to play with them or what expression she should have. But who cares about expressions? If she didn't join in, she would never know. Excitement filled their faces the moment Paula joined them. They spent their entire day in the pool as they savored the moment and enjoyed every bit. Standing at Onodera's family doorstep, Ichigo was in his constant dilemma, wondering if a guy visiting a girl at home alone was okay. Earlier that morning, Ruri called him to visit Kozaki, who was sick, since she had nothing to do. Also, she told him that Kozaki wanted him to come over, which drove him into complete shock. That was why he really did come over. Kozaki was surprised to see Ichigo. He told him that Ruri asked him to go there, but Kozaki knew nothing about it. He was pissed off. Ruri completely set his hopes up by telling him that Kozaki wanted him to visit. The moment Haru entered the house, she pushed Ichigo out right away, but then suddenly stopped the moment she handed her some strawberry rice cakes from Suzumiya. It was an obvious bribe, but because of that, she allowed him to stay over in their house for a while. In the kitchen, Ichigo was cooking rice porridge with Haru. Haru was just criticizing him the whole time, telling him how bad of a person he was for two-timing. Ichigo didn't know what to say. She wanted to explain once again, but he knew Haru wouldn't bother to hear him out. After giving the porridge to Kozaki, Ichigo suddenly touched Haru's neck, which caused her to freak out. However, he didn't mean anything bad, he just wanted to check if she also caught a fever, and she did. Ichigo asked her to take a rest, but she refused since no one would be able to take care of Kozaki if she did. He offered to take care of her sister, but she would rather pass out than let him do that. But come to think of it, she would pass out and collapse for pushing herself too hard. Wouldn't Kozaki feel responsible for that? Having enough of how Haru was acting towards her, Ichigo told her that she didn't want to make Kozaki feel uncomfortable, and didn't intend to. Reassured by what he said, she followed his suggestion to take a rest. Ichigo spent his entire day taking care of two sick ladies, and that was also when Haru realized that she had been too harsh on him. He was actually kind and thoughtful, just like what her sister had said, and she did appreciate the effort and time that he spent taking care of her and her sister. Suddenly, she pulled out the locket. Ichigo was surprised as he thought that she would finally give it back to him, but disappointment became evident on his face when he knew that she wouldn't. She was just going to leave it under his care and give it to her by the moment she and her prince would finally meet. But little did she know, the one who saved her from those thugs was standing right in front of her. At the school garden, Ichigo was asking Meiko who his crush was but couldn't get an answer from him. Instead, Ichigo received some clues that were too broad for him to determine. In the middle of their talk, Meiko excused himself, leaving Ichigo behind. Tsugumi came in. He suddenly remembered the scene from Valentine's Day where he saw her with Meiko. He began to investigate if the girl Meiko liked was her. That was why he asked her some questions, like what would she do if someone unattainable or someone she could never hope for would love her back? Silence filled the area. As he saw the change of Tsugumi's mood, he took this question back and apologized. Out of nowhere, she answered, saying that she would probably hide it. She would never tell a soul how she felt and never told that she liked him either. She would go on hiding it until the day that love withered and died. Ichigo was surprised by her answer, since it sounded like an opinion of a grown-up with tons of experience. The next day, their homeroom teacher announced that she was getting married next month. The whole class was filled with happiness and hoped their teacher for a successful marriage. At their usual spot, Ichigo and Meiko were talking about their teacher's marriage. Meiko was happy for her and will surely miss her. Seeing Meiko's expression and mannerisms, Ichigo can really tell that Meiko was lying, and he pointed it out. That moment, he didn't deny and confess that the girl that he liked was their homeroom teacher. It all began the first time he saw her. It all felt like love at first sight. Ichigo suggested that Meiko should confess, but he declined. Telling her how he felt so he wouldn't have any regrets would just be self-serving, nothing more. Also, what he had with her was a great memory itself. He would just take that unrequited love and quietly put it away in a corner of his heart as a bittersweet page of his youth. Thinking about what Meiko said, he really had a point. It would do any good to confess since the girl he liked was bound to marry someone else. But if Ichigo was him and one day he had to say goodbye to someone he loved without even telling her how he felt, wouldn't he have any regrets? Although, just as he was imagining that it was like inflicting horrible damage on his soul. But if the girl he really liked was really in love with someone and was happy with him, he wouldn't get in their way. Would he confess? On their homeroom teacher's last day in school, students were happily sending her off except for Meiko, who was on the rooftop watching the gray sky. Ichigo came to see him. Before their teacher went, he gave Meiko a push to do what he really wanted and live the rest of his youth without unsaid words. Without wasting any time, Meiko ran fast towards the love of his life. While running under the rain, he saw her inside the taxi. The moment she noticed Meiko, she asked what was wrong, and there he began to confess about how he felt. She was cool about it and told him to just enjoy his teenage years. She was pretty sure that he would be a great gentleman someday. Kozaki's agony began the moment she stepped on the weighing scale. Shock was evident on her face as she noticed that she gained weight. The next day, she went to school without eating any breakfast to somehow lose her weight. Ichigo sat on the chair beside her. Seeing him made her more eager to lose weight. The last thing she wanted was for him to find out that she had gained any weight. While walking in the hallway, Chitogi came up to her and reminded her of their girl's date. It turned out that they had planned on going to an eat-all-you-can dessert bar. Badly wanting to lose weight, she declined and made an excuse just to get away with it. Hunger striked. She couldn't contain it anymore. That was why she hid and tried to eat her lunch early. However, Ichigo saw her. She was flustered. Embarrassment ate her at the moment their eyes met. In the classroom, Kozaki still couldn't get over what happened. As he noticed her actions that day, Ichigo thought she was acting a little weird. During swim class, Kozaki was really determined to shred some pounds. She went to the pool and tried to swim even though she didn't know how. In the end, she ended up drowning. At home, she checked her weight again, hoping that it would decrease since she didn't eat anything throughout the day. And to her surprise, she gained weight. Wasn't the result she expected. The next day at school, Ichigo noticed that she looked depressed. He wanted to cheer her up somehow, so he pulled up her favorite food. Her eyes were full of delightment, but then she remembered that she wanted to lose weight. So she rejected him and ran away. She sat at the school's garden while watching the blue sky as she thought that she might have hurt his feelings because of her selfishness. She wanted to apologize to him and wondered if he would ever let her try her favorite food again. Suddenly, someone handed her some tea. It was Ichigo. It turned out that he was worried since he noticed that she hadn't eaten anything lately. He thought that making her favorite would make her eat at least. She was touched knowing that he was worried about her all along and even made an effort to make her feel better. At home, she tried to weigh herself once again. Her mom saw her and told her that the weighing scale was broken. It drove her crazy. It was broken all along, which means that her weight wasn't even accurate. Kozaki met Ichigo during their 9th grade. They didn't really talk with each other at first and soon became acquaintances. She liked him, and every day she had always been waiting for him to greet her good morning and goodbye. That was why when she heard that he would be studying at Bonyari for high school, she was devastated, but eventually decided there too. She asked her friend Ruri, who also decided to study there, to help her study for the entrance exam. She studied harder than she normally did. On the day of the entrance exam, she saw Ichigo, who was surprised to see her. Seeing him gave her motivation to do her best in the exams. However, when the results of the exam came, she was disappointed. She didn't make it. Her efforts turned to nothing, and the worst was, she wouldn't be able to hear his good mornings ever again. It was snowing. Kozaki was sitting at the bench thinking about what had just happened when Ichigo came. He had heard of what happened and accompanied her there since she was all alone. He offered to lend her his scarf, but she didn't take it. However, it was so cold, so she forced her to just take it with him. Under the snowfall, looking like a couple, Kozaki and Ichigo were so close with each other while sharing a scarf. In an attempt to break the silence between them, Ichigo was about to say something when suddenly Kozaki's mom called informing her that she passed. She got admitted from Bonyari's waiting list and they just got the letter. They were both surprised, especially Ichigo, who was jumping around, clearly showing how happy he was for her. Since that day, Kozaki and Ichigo had been having slightly more substantial conversations. Even so, even though they were both juniors now, her love had yet to be realized. But the unchanging bliss of her days still continues. On a normal school day, Chitogi was in a rush. In the classroom, she noticed that she had lost her favorite ribbon. It had a huge effect on her, so Ichigo and their friends offered to help her. In an attempt to lift up her mood, Ichigo offered to buy her some ramen, but she rejected it. Looking how meek she had gotten, Ichigo couldn't stand seeing her like that. Suddenly, he just thought she was hot. She looked kind of feminine. Wanting to prove his thoughts, he challenged her for arm wrestling but was defeated. He ended up disappointing himself for getting his hopes up. It has been a while, but they still couldn't find her ribbon. It left Ichigo no choice but to buy her a new one and tricked her by telling her it was her old ribbon. But the moment she saw it, she knew it wasn't her ribbon. Scared of how she may react, he hurriedly apologized but was surprised when Chitogi reacted gently towards it. Suddenly, Ichigo spotted her ribbon above the pole, but it was blown by the wind. Without any hesitation, Chitogi ran towards it, but it went to the train track and was hit by the train, shredding it to pieces. She was devastated. When Ichigo came, it turned out that the broken ribbon was the new one and he had actually picked up her old ribbon. Happiness was painted on her face the moment she confirmed it. She couldn't be more happier. While on their way home, Chitogi thought of confessing to Ichigo, but he wondered what expression he would give towards her. Would he be happy? Disgusted? She bet he would definitely be disgusted. After all, he didn't see her as a girlfriend. For a few days, she practiced so hard to confess her feelings. She tried to write a letter and even practiced saying it, but it seemed so hard. While going out with Ichigo, she suddenly spaced out and tripped due to the constant dilemma whether to confess or not. Ichigo tended to her wound, and he noticed that there was something bugging her lately. It was worrying him. Hearing how worried he was about her kinda made her happy. The thought of him thinking about her made her that much happier. While spending time with Ichigo, she realized that she should just take her time and enjoy every moment with him. She didn't have to rush confessing her feelings. If the perfect time comes and her feelings still wouldn't change, she would gather enough courage to tell him how she felt and be brave enough to accept what his reaction would be.